You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions.
WeeklyTrek.
Episode 19.
Hello everyone, welcome to this wonderful episode of Weekly Trek. This is Shashank from WeeklyTreks. When I'm not here messing around, catching all of you up with Weekly Trek, I co-host a political/cultural show about Star Trek with Barry DeFord called Polytreks on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. As always, I am a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions Network. You can find us on www.tricordertransmissions.com. You can follow Polytreks on @Polytreks on Twitter. And if you've listened to the show before, you know what it's about. But for those of you joining us today for the first time, in a few sentences, the show is essentially a weekly catch-up on what has been going on in the universe of Star Trek over this week. It's like the 6 o'clock news, but with Star Trek. We bring up all kinds of interesting news updates that we get about Star Trek, actor interviews, updates about Discovery, controversies, happy things. We will get you covered up with everything we have going on in the world. And we usually do our best to keep it to 30 minutes or so, but it always depends on our guests. Sometimes it's a long show, sometimes it's a short show, but no matter how the show goes, I have a feeling it'll be a really good one today because I'm joined by one of our very special guests, a regular listener, Tricorder superfan, Jamie McGregor from across the pond in Australia. Hey, Jamie, how are you, man?
G'day, Shashank. How are things? Yes, it's quite a sizable pond, and I am joining the roving and marauding band of Weekly Trek co-hosts that you have following STLV. I got the okay from the Tricorder Transmissions impresarios, Jeff and Heather, to join in every now and again when you need some assistance. So great to be on the show and talk about all the things Trek that have happened in the last week or so.
Yes, I have a feeling it's Heather and Jeff's very subtle way of monitoring me because I do the show so often and I ramble on and on. They'd like an adult on the show so they can keep things in check. So thank you for keeping me in check today, Jamie.
Well, they're sorely disappointed if they were looking for an adult. But look, let's give it a crack and we'll see how we go. And looking forward to chatting with you.
Oh, it's going to be a madhouse. But I'm going to start off with a downer, Jamie. I hope you're sitting down for this. I really, and I hope all our listeners are grabbing onto something so they don't fall off the chair or wherever they're sitting. But this is going to be bad news. William Shatner has said he will not be coming back to do full regular Star Trek series.
Well, you're very specific there about full and regular, and look, yes, he's decided that he doesn't have enough time at this stage of his life to put towards a full-time Star Trek show, and that makes sense to me, doesn't it? I mean, I think Patrick Stewart has made the decision that he doesn't have enough time left such that he can't afford not to come back, but William Shatner obviously feels the exact opposite.
Well, this is a report coming in from The Star, which is a popular newspaper above me, across the border in Canada. And during an interview with The Star, Shatner said, I don't think I have the time and the energy to come back and do a main Star Trek series in this interview. But the reason why I get specific is because he also said, well, if they give me the right parameters, I'm happy to come back and do a guest role in any of the Star Trek shows. But I think he was hinting at Discovery because the way season 2 is going, spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen season 1 and what's wrong with you, but Discovery catches up to the Enterprise with Pike and Spock. So he has not ruled out being a guest or a recurring character on any of the Star Trek shows, but I think he was hinting at Discovery. And when I say parameters, of course, I mean for someone of Shatner's stature, it has to be the right amount. It has to be the right role. It has to be something that he agrees with. He famously was against doing any kind of guesting on the Kelvin timeline movies. That's a well known fact. And here we are. He says he does not want to do a new main show in which he's the star, but he certainly has not ruled out a guest role, which leaves us Shatner heads some hope and some optimism.
It's an interesting time for the Star Trek universe at the moment, I think, because we have these new shows just ready to break new ground and push Star Trek in a direction in which it hasn't gone before. Yet, on the one hand, you've got a show that's now going to be spearheaded by Patrick Stewart, which is, Back to the Future, so to speak. And on the other, you've got Discovery, which, of course, is a prequel. So it's this weird moment when we're kind of looking at how can we go to new places and see new things, but at the same time, we're actually going back in time to stuff that happened, in the last 50 years. From a Star Trek perspective. So I'm not sure what I want out of what is coming up in Star Trek. Do I want William Shatner back? Do I not? What do I want to see all of the DS9 and Voyager and TNG characters come back to life in Patrick Stewart's new show? Or do I really actually want to see something new and different? And so I'll be honest, I'm not too fussed if the great Shat wants to, stick it out for now until a nice, juicy guest role comes along and maybe he'll say yes. That'd suit me just fine.
And I even wonder, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about what you have in mind when you say that. I even wonder what kind of a role he would do. I don't imagine he would be very physical in the role he's doing. He certainly can't run across fields and start fighting Gorns because he's in his 90s, if I'm not wrong. And it's certainly an interesting. It's what the best thing I can imagine him doing is maybe they do a digitally de-aged version of him where he's sitting in a ship and he's guiding things. Maybe we see a young Kirk, but we've already seen a young Kirk in the timeline movies. Granted, that's a different timeline, but it's just a big mess. But if anybody can figure it out, I think it's the Discovery guys.
He would appear in the Mycelial Network. That's where he would be as a kind of a future version of Captain Kirk, come back to help Pike or something. I don't know what it would be, but look, he's pretty sprightly for his age, quite frankly. I wouldn't put it past him. He's still working, and not just as an actor, Shashank. He's working as would you call it a singer as well? I'm not entirely sure.
Well, I'll let you tell us a little bit more about that singer lead in, but he also writes, he rides horses, he directs, he does a lot of behind the scenes stuff. He's regularly doing panels and conventions. Everybody who attended STLV knows his was the famous panel that preceded the Picard announcement. So he does a lot of things. I think he's working on another book. But yeah, interesting. What is that singer lead in about there, Jamie?
Well, he's announced recently his new Christmas album, which is Shatner Claus. And this is the Christmas album you didn't know that you don't actually want, but must have. I think William Shatner chatting his way as he does in his inimitable style through a bunch of Christmas classics. I'm just looking down the complete track list below. The classics, Jingle Bells, Little Drummer Boy, etc., and a few, Silent Night gets in there, White Christmas, Feliz Navidad. I mean, really, it's... and he's got a very impressive list of guest collaborators, including, Henry Rollins, Brad Paisley, Iggy Pop. I don't know if he's going to be appearing as a Vorta, but Iggy Pop in that particular duet. But anyway, if you like the stylings of William Shatner singing, then this is going to be the greatest Christmas ever for you. If, on the other hand, you find this kind of stuff reasonably distasteful that every single person has to put out a Christmas album, then, and I might actually be in that category, then you might even give this one a miss. Don't know. We'll have to see how it sounds when it comes out. Which of those two camps are you in?
So I am firmly in the. I am a raised Hindu atheist who doesn't know what to do around Christmas, so I'm going to listen to this because of the novelty of it category. I don't know how much in the minority I am on that, but I will definitely listen to it. And Jamie, for that kind of blasphemy about saying you're not particularly interested in this album, you're hereby disinvited from all future shows. I'm so sorry, but you can't diss Shatner like that. That's just not cool.
Can
How
I
dare you?
can I redeem myself by saying I actually really like his? He has a 2006 album, Has Been, and that have you heard that album?
No, I have not. Tell us about it.
It's actually pretty good. And yes, he talks, sings his way through, but it's actually a really good album. I've forgotten who his support the support artist is that backs it up, but there's a couple of really great tracks on it. So and some funny stuff as well. So check that out. Has Been really good album from 2006. So look, it's not everything Shatner is tacky. Some of it is genius, and that album was, and hopefully his Christmas album will be as well.
Well, while we await with bated breath for his Christmas album and hope that it's amazing and incredible like everything Shatner does, we can also hope for that guest role on Discovery. And speaking of Discovery, a recent article that also went into a little bit of details from STLV panel revealed that one of Discovery's episodes was actually rewritten at the last minute. Did you know that, Jamie?
I did because I was at the panel. This was from the Rainn Wilson panel. Is that right at STLV? He was there talking about it, and he actually was referring to the fact that Ted Sullivan, who was assisting him in that particular episode, came along, flew in from LA to Toronto, and helped him a lot as the script was rewritten at the last minute. I got to say, it was probably my favorite episode of that particular season, first season of Discovery, and I mean, it wasn't just the best episode of Star Trek Discovery's first season. It was also the best episode of Disco Trek. I will say that particular episode because that was the episode that Barry and I was on, analyzing Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. So, and I got to say, that particular episode of Disco Trek was totally put together right on the spot, and put together with short notice. So, in fact, most of it we were just talking off the top of our head, like we are now. So, who can argue with the fact that maybe a deadline focuses the mind? And I'm certainly delighted at how the show turned out. So, yeah, look, haven't you ever done your best work with a short-term deadline, Shashank?
I'm actually doing it right now. This is the episode. This is our short term deadline work. But yes, thank you for sharing that with us. It looks like the news itself was talked about a little bit more because we are reporting this from wegotdiscovered.com. And on it, it looks like Wilson Cruz also talked about it on one of his panels where he just told us about that particular episode. And Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad is definitely one of those really innovative, interesting episodes, and it certainly has that Groundhog Day, Edge of Tomorrow, and for a few people who've seen it, the source code vibe. These are movies in which there is the go through the same day again, over and over vibe. And this episode certainly has that trope, and it's a very interesting take on that. So one interesting thing about such kind of episodes is I was talking about this today with someone else, but it's what you'd call a bottleneck episode. So by going back to the same sets and doing the same scenes over and over again, shows save money. So when they're low on budget, they try to find innovative ways to tell a story. And it's interesting that I'm sure that was what the situation was with this one to a certain extent. They were in a bind and they thought, hey, how do we get the best possible episode for the cheapest amount of budget? And somebody went, why don't we just do a scene over and over and we catch up on some time that way? And it's just the way it turned out. I have no complaints about it, but it was fascinating to know that that went through for the season one as well.
Well, you hear this a fair bit. Star Trek has had a long history of bottle shows, and you can always tell when an episode takes place entirely on the existing sets that they sure saved some money on that episode. But the funny thing about it from a Trek point of view is I think sometimes those are actually the best episodes. I think the most famous example of a really top-line bottle show would be Duet from DS9's first season. You know, they don't go anywhere. They don't have any, and there are very few sets that are not freestanding sets. And I wonder whether there is something about challenging the writers to create a story that's more about character and a jeopardy that doesn't involve, you know, huge explosions and going places and doing things, but you're actually challenging the writers to come up with something that is captivating and that draws the audience in without going anywhere or spending a huge amount of money in stuff that otherwise can distract you from the story itself. So I have a feeling that the writers probably enjoy being challenged by bottle shows when they have to save some money, and really they end up doing some of their best work when they're faced with that.
Absolutely. And speaking about being challenged, trying to figure out ways to revamp things or redo things, we all, I'm sure, are aware that at this point the Chris's have walked away from Star Trek. So we don't have Chris Pine, who's our Kirk in the Kelvin timeline, and Chris Hemsworth, who's going to play George Kirk, his father on the next Star Trek movie, have both walked away from contract negotiations. So at this point, we are without a Kirk, senior and junior. So one update we have on that is John Cho, our beloved Sulu, is he has revealed that he's just waiting to find out what's going on with Star Trek 4. All he knows is at this point that they're going to do a movie, but that's all he knows. And he said something interesting. He says that he would also rather not know what they're going to do with the movie. So it looks like, from his perspective, this is definitely going to go ahead. And this is from trekmovie.com, where he talked about the new movie on USA Today. He certainly feels optimistic, and I would like to share his sense of optimism. What do you think, Jamie?
Well, I wonder whether... I mean, I think you guys already referred to this particular situation in a previous episode of Weekly Trek, looking at whether this was just a contract negotiating tactic to make it public that these guys have walked away from the table. I mean, I think we all know what the score is, right? Which is that, since the first Star Trek, reboot movie, Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pine have become really popular. And their dollar value that they can command is pretty substantial now, and really one wonders whether I've seen a couple of people take different sides to this, whether or not Star Trek needs Chris Pine more than Chris Pine needs Star Trek, and if that's the case, then Paramount's going to have to pony up the cash if in fact it needs Chris Pine more than the reverse. And they can't recast Kirk at this point, can they, Shashank? Surely they're in a bind. You could probably have a story. You could rewrite the story without Chris Hemsworth as George Kirk, but I don't think you can really have a Star Trek reboot movie without Chris Pine as Kirk, can you? Do you think that's even possible?
Well, I'm 100% serious when I say that the best thing that this franchise can do in the wake of this news is actually spin off into solo stories. And no pun intended, Sulu, a Star Trek story, much like Solo, a Star Wars story, is a really interesting, creative way to take this franchise. At least for me, I think it's about time we got a lot more from John Cho himself. He's proven himself to be an incredible actor over and over, and I think he would be best suited in a lead role. And we just need, like with Crazy Rich Asians that's doing wonders across the global box office right now, it's clear that there is a need for minorities both on and off Star Trek to start giving us that voice. So I really think give them like $30-40 million, do really, again, no, not to go back to what we're talking about, do a really good bottleneck story. Give us a small, nice Star Trek movie in which Sulu gives us his perspective and his story, because that's a really interesting story. He has a husband, he has a child. They can do a really good family story set in Star Trek. They can also do a solo shipwreck story of Sulu maybe stuck somewhere and trying to figure things out. So I really think they could afford to take this risk in the wake of this news. But yes, you're right. In If they have to go back to Star Trek 4 and give us a new movie with that crew, they really can't do it without Kirk. But I err on the side of both the franchise and Chris Pine need each other, because apart from Star Trek, the only other franchise that has been a big global success for Chris Pine is Wonder Woman, and he's a supporting character in that. And he died in the last movie. Of course, he's going to be back in the new one in some way, but he died in the last one. A Wrinkle in Time did not take off. He tried a couple of other things. His indies very rarely take off, and they don't. Indies in general, the rule of thumb is that they don't do well. So he needs this as much as they need him. So I really think there is some negotiation that needs to be done there for sure.
Well, I would be delighted for one to watch the solo Sulu Star Trek story that you have in mind. I'm not sure that the network that the movie studio bosses would see it quite the same way, but fingers crossed they do if the other guys play hardball and we don't go in that direction. And keep in mind we've still got the Quentin Tarantino movie as well sitting there. So who knows exactly who's going to be in that and how that's going to work and what the story is there. So it's an exciting time, and we're just treading water here, waiting for all the stars to iron their process out and get on board and sign on that dotted line so we can head to the cinemas and see them all in action once again.
If you're really interested, I don't know how much of a fan of comics you are, but the IDW series did a really good Sulu storyline in Star Trek Boldly Go, which came out a few years ago, which continues the adventures of the Kelvin crew after Star Trek Beyond. So everybody has kind of split off and they're working on different ships. And Sulu has a really interesting story arc in there. But speaking of the IDW comics, the solicitations, which is just a fancy way of saying the press releases and previews, have come out for November from IDW. And this is from TrekMovie.com. We are looking at this as we record and speak, but we're looking at a gorgeous cover of Star Trek versus Transformers #3 that comes out in November. There is also Star Trek Terra Incognita #5. And there is Star Trek Waypoint Special #1, which was announced at STLV this year. And that's going to be an anthology collection of all kinds of short stories from across the universe. But yeah, what's your relationship with the comics, Jamie? What did you think of this article?
I'm delighted they're heading in that direction, and although I'm not a massive comic reader myself, I will ask this. This Star Trek versus Transformers, isn't Transformers another property which Paramount owns? Isn't this the solution to the Chris Pine, Chris Hemsworth problem? Can we not just smash those two franchises together, and how happy would you be to see that particular movie made?
Oh my God, this would be the perfect ending to the 15-minute glory shots we got from the motion picture. I would love to see Michael Bay show us explosions for 15 minutes of the Enterprise and just watching all kinds of cheesy brand promotions. If you've seen the Transformers movies that he made, people will randomly pick up product names. So I would love to see a Nokia transponder and a USS Enterprise branded with the Budweiser logo. I'm just really excited for those movies now.
Well, Shashank, I gotta say, I have not actually seen most of the Transformers movies. However, I have heard the Transformers movies while they were on in a cinema next to the cinema that I was in, watching a different movie, and they certainly, they would certainly bring a je ne sais quoi to the Star Trek franchise. So I'm not entirely sure I would want whatever that I don't know what is, but anyway, I think if Star Trek fans were excited by a Quentin Tarantino movie, I'm not sure how they would react to the prospect of a Michael Bay crossover movie. But in the meantime, until that happens, they will just have to make do with the IDW comics. Have you read the first? If this is the third issue coming out, have you read the first two?
Well, a couple of clarifications for those of you Americans listening. A cinema is what the rest of the world calls a theater, a movie
Oh,
theater.
sorry.
And je ne sais quoi is a fancy French word that people use that I don't know what it means. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But if you don't know, congratulations. You're as smart as I am. So good job. Way to go.
Shashank,
But
please. As if all of your weekly Trek listeners didn't spend their entire week googling, brutalist architecture last week. So, hey,
Oh, good callback. Good callback. But the Star Trek versus Transformers crossover is one I'm definitely excited about. It comes out in September, so I have not read it yet. Right now, Star Trek Discovery Succession has just ended, which is a continuation of what happens in the Klingon Empire after
okay.
Discovery. And it's a really good comic. And another one that I've been reading is Star Trek Terra Incognita, uh, which has its covers here, and you can see a really cool variant cover from J.K. Woodward which is again a continuation from what happens in the mirrored universe in Star Trek after Mirror Broken and Through the Mirror that came out last year and this year. But I'm actually excited, honestly, for Star Trek versus Transformers, which pits the animated series crew with the 1986 cartoon Transformers crew, and it's
Wow.
the yeah, and it's the Autobots teaming up with the good guys and the Decepticons teaming up with the bad guys, and havoc ensues. So I'm honestly very very excited for that, and I'm one of those comic book nerds. If people haven't figured that out already, so I attended all the comic book panels at STLV, and I got to see the writer Mike Johnson talk about this on stage, and he is really 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 excited about this comic. He has shown how passionate he is, and he wants to make sure that people actually feel that their 3.99 per issue is paid for in full worth when they buy this comic. He also did the famous Star Trek Green Lantern crossover, which I covered on Reading Trek with Marty and Will. But if it's any proof of how that guy can write, I'm honestly very excited for this one.
That's awesome. And I will say this much, because I'm very old. I saw that Transformers 1986 movie in what I would refer to as the cinema. So there you go. Yeah, although I can't remember a huge amount about it, I'm sure some. It doesn't. Okay, no. Let's not talk spoilers for a movie that premiered 30 years ago. But what doesn't Optimus Prime die in the end or something or other? And they anyway, never mind. What an amazing franchise they have been, and I'm excited if you're excited.
I am genuinely excited, and I really want people to go out and support this because yeah, I know it sounds kind of cheesy and out there for a concept, but the only way we'll get more wacky and on the edge concepts like this is if people go out and support it. And really, I do not think people would be disappointed because comics in general, uh, the people who make them are a lot more passionate about the franchises that they're given, especially ones that come off from other media properties. And Mike Johnson has been writing Star Trek for a few years now, so he definitely knows all of these guys well. And yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. Honestly, the other small but important piece of news to me is that they're doing a few variant covers, and there is a really good variant cover by Megan Levens, and there is an all-female crew of the Transformers and Star Trek on the cover for number three. So I'm excited for these variant covers. Also, might be something I might pick up just because it looks beautiful with the crew from our Star Trek, some of the female crew members from Star Trek in the front, and some female Transformers in the background.
Yeah, it looks awesome. That's Nurse Chapel and Emrys and Uhura, and I don't know the other the Transformers on it. But yeah, it looks great.
That's why you need to pick up the comic, Jamie.
Yes, well, I look. Last I heard, John Krikorian of Trek Profiles was taking your advice and dipping his toe into the pool of Star Trek comics, and well, maybe you might have another convert here. Let's wait and see.
Yeah, I'm going to gamble and say that you will enjoy it. Speaking of gamble, there is a Star Trek board game coming up that's all about gambling. Have you heard about Galactic Enterprises at all?
I hadn't, but I have now, and anything Deep Space Nine, I'm excited about. So obviously this year we've got the 25th anniversary of the show, and we've got the documentary coming out, and I think you were very excited by the profit motive beer that was on display at STLV and in other places, which is even if of course you wouldn't be drinking it. The very least that it exists makes you happy. And while I love board games, I like playing board games. I'm not a complete board game geek, but the notion of playing this particular game looks like a lot of fun. You've got your gold press latinum, you've got your a bunch of different cards, and it's a kind of an auctioning game, from what I can gather. I believe that it is a board game that has kind of reskinned another older game called Fantasy Business. But hey, if you can put a DS9 spin on something, Quark is the central character, and they build in all the rules of acquisition. So a kind of board game you can play with three to five people sounds like a great idea to me. Yeah, and there's not enough stuff out there DS9 themed from my point of view. Is that a fair thing to say, Shashank?
Listen, I love the Ferengi. I have
Yes, this would be
debated
right down
about them.
This would be right down your alley.
Yeah, I have debated for them. I have passionately fought for them. Ferengi are one of my favorite alien races in all of Star Trek, and I don't mind admitting it. I think it's because I see a lot of Indianness in them. They speak a lot to me from the Hindu culture point of view, and the way the Ferengis are, the Indian folk are a little bit. We are a little bit materialistic. We can definitely do better about the way we treat the less fortunate in our society. And really, I'm not just saying this. Like, even though Ferengi rule of acquisition number 39 says praise is cheap, heap it generously on all customers, I'm being sincere on this one when I say the Ferengis are endlessly fascinating and they are incredible. And the fact that there is a board game out, and the review that we are both looking at is on Treco.com, and they did an advanced review. So I believe the game comes out sometime in September, but it's a card game and it can be played with 3 to 8 players, and it usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour. For sure, shouldn't be a very long game, but it's pretty much like a business game. It's if I were to describe the game to me, from what I've understood of it, it's a bunch of products that you can sell on DS9 or anywhere from the Ferengi point of view, laid out in front, and people can go across and spend their latinum to buy it and then resell it. And when you resell a product, you get a certain unique advantage that the product selling gives you. But where the game gets interesting is if 2 or more people have the same product. So for example, if I'm selling Ractogino powder and you're selling Ractogino powder and it's 4 units, but you decide you have more than enough of it, and when 2 or 3 people get the same product like Ractogino powder, and we three decide, hey, let's sell it at 4 units, but Jamie, when it's your turn, I sell it at 4, and then when it's your turn, somebody else the other guy sells it at 4, but on your turn, you say, you know what? Surprise, I'm going to sell it for 2. And you get rid of all your Actogeno. You make more profit and you get more of the advantage that that product gives you. So there is a hinge of betrayal in the game, which adds a very interesting turn to me. And I believe it's an age-old take on another WizKids game, but again, Ferengi rule of acquisition number 21, never place friendship before profit. So that's where the game gets interesting, and the first person to get rid of all their product wins the game, I believe, is how it works. But can you tell I'm excited about this game?
I can. And look, I'll be honest with you. I'm not entirely sure that I have a much better idea of how exactly the game is played now than I did before. But I will say this much. It seems to provide all of the value of teaching young children the value of capitalism that we need in this particular time, because I don't really think that there are enough messages to young children about the joys and benefits of capitalism. Really, wouldn't you agree? So it's about time we had a game out there to inculcate the families around the world of the benefits of rampant capitalism. So that's fantastic, and who better than the Ferengi to push that particular barrow? So this sounds like it has the makings of a fun couple of hours at STLV at a party somewhere. And I hope, just like other board games and Monopoly, that it finishes with someone tipping the board over and complaining that the whole thing is just totally a mess. Isn't that how most games of Monopoly finish? I'm fairly sure.
Ferengi rule of acquisition number 171 states time is latinum. The early Ferengi gets the latinum. As children, you're never too early to start making that latinum.
That is so good. Yeah. No, this
The
this
quicker
sounds like
you
it's going
start
to be
making
great.
that profit.
Yes, of course. And
But it looks like it's retailing at 25 to $30 now. And there are little well done pieces of latinum from cardboard, I believe. I'll just pay $30 for that. But you're right. It's more or less me hungering for more DS9 properties. And again, I think if we support this, we'll get, who knows, we might actually get a Dabo board game at some
yeah.
point, which would be awesome, right?
Yeah, I mean, is there? If they got? I don't know if they've got Daba or Tongo or any of those DS9 things. I mean, everyone's jumped on board the three-dimensional chess game, but there don't seem to be enough representations of Tongo or Dabo out there that I'm aware of. So this can be a step in that direction in the meantime.
Yeah, here's hoping we get more DS9 and Star Trek themed board games, but there is something definitely coming up that I'm sure you'll be excited about, and we'll be closing with this today, but it looks like we're closer than ever to getting Discovery Season 1 Blu-ray. It was announced at STLV during the main cast panel with Scott Mans moderating, but he announced right then that the Discovery Season 1 Blu-ray will be coming out on November 13th in US and Canada, but we actually have, according to Trekco.com, dates for the international release of Blu-ray. And it looks like in your beautiful nation of Australia, it's going to be coming out on November 28th. Are you excited for this Blu-ray, Jamie?
I am. I just happened to have got myself a new television, which is going to be. It's going to need some Blu-ray content that needs to go on it. That's going to be fantastic, and this sounds like it fits the bill. Of course, all these international territories have had Discovery on Netflix, but we want the same access to the 2 hours of special features that the Blu-ray sets will provide. And I was actually looking through what those special features are a little while ago, and they look fantastic. So I believe the UK gets these on November 19, so only 6 days after they're in the US. And then there's a kind of a rollout through Scandinavia, Brazil, Spain, Germany, Australia, Italy, and France until early December. So how many people do you think across the world will be waking up on Christmas morning, atheist, Hindus or not, and discovering in their Christmas sack provided to them by Father Christmas, or whatever you refer to the cultural equivalent in your particular land, a copy of Shatner Claus. I mean, a copy of Discovery's version, Series 1, Season 1 DVD Blu-ray set. How many people do you think are going to be excited by that on Christmas morning? What do you think?
So I'm guessing if the world was a fair place, every person would make this their priority, and every living human being, even pregnant women who are expecting children, would buy a copy for their children. So by that number, we should at least have 8 billion or so copies ready to go out. But since
Yes.
we live in a world where people don't recognize genius when they see it, and it comes to their homes in Blu-ray if they just click on a few things. But since that is the world we live in, I'm going to imagine that they're going to sell close to 50,
4
60 million
billion?
copies.
Oh, okay.
4 billion does sound like a really good number, but I want to say they'll be selling close to at least 50 million copies. Well, I'm getting this number. I promise I'm not pulling it out of my butt. Uh, it looks like CBS All Access, last we heard, is aiming to get to 16 million subscribers. And so I would imagine they're well on their way, over 13 or 14 easy. And if you count the number of people who watch it on Netflix or however they watch it across the world, and given that people enjoyed the show and they want to watch the wealth of content that's going to be available on the Blu-ray, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people vying for this. And definitely, speaking of rampant capitalism, not at all in a move designed to make more profit and get people to buy more Star Trek stuff so people can make profit. There is also going to be a steelbook version released, which is pretty much the exact same Blu-ray in a steel cover, which again,
That's right,
I
Shashank. And
as
really, if you're a self-respecting Star Trek fan, you're going to have to buy both, aren't you?
like, how are you even a fan? Why would you call yourself a fan if you're not
Exactly
buying the
right.
steelbook version and the regular version? Actually, you have to buy two of each because you need to open one, then keep one in mint condition. So in 30 years, it triples or quadruples in value, and you
Exactly
can
right.
sell it so you can pay for your kids' college.
Just like my Deep Space Nine DVDs from season one, which are currently now worth $8.60 on eBay, I'm fairly sure. But never mind, get out there and buy both of those. And here's my ulterior motive, Shashank. I just want Star Trek people out there buying Blu-ray stuff so that maybe, just maybe, they say, there's an appetite out there for Star Trek stuff. Let's up-res the whole of DS9, hey, and put that into HD. The only way they're ever going to do that, given the way that the TNG set sold, is if there seems to be a lot of interest in Trek stuff. So I'll be out there doing my bit to send the message to CBS. We want more of this content on in HD.
Well, certainly, I hope we get to a point where people buy enough Star Trek to go, one of our best shows, DS9, might actually need to be remade in HD. I hope they get to that point.
Totally. Or they will get to the point where they say, let's make that Transformers Star Trek crossover movie. Whichever one comes first, I think you'll be happy with.
There is anything you slap Star Trek on, I'll probably watch it. It's just that's who I am as a person. I am not going to be ashamed of it. But speaking of wondering things, I certainly wonder also. You were at the Rainn Wilson panel, so you can attest to this. But he did make fun of the people who said, "Oh, I can't afford $6 a month to watch All Access." Do you think the people who said that now have any argument against what is clearly one of the best season ones in the franchise, not buying that Blu-ray? You think people will use that excuse again because now it's available to watch it whenever, wherever?
Well, I do think that there is an argument for people that say, hey, they can't afford CBS All Access. I get that. There are people that can't afford Netflix. There are people that can't afford those kind of streaming services. I totally get that. What I think Rainn Wilson made a great point was, I don't think those people are also spending $1,000 on a gold seat at a convention and still put their hand up to say, I'm not interested in supporting Star Trek by watching Discovery and paying for the pleasure of it. So I think that was more the point that he was making, rather than to simply say, look, everyone can afford CBS All Access. So I think he was right to make that point. And all those people that don't want CBS All Access for whatever particular reason, no excuse now. Get it on Blu-ray or DVD, and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, and but if I were to end on this particular article, and I would certainly like to hear from everyone about whether they're going to buy it, follow WeeklyTrek at WeeklyTrek on Twitter and tell us when this episode drops whether you'll be interested in buying any of the products that we talked about today. But I certainly wonder if people would consider the wealth of special features that are going to be available on this. At STLV, they shared one of the makeup featurettes and give, like, if that's any hint, I'm sure that'll be an exciting addition and one of the many reasons why people should buy the Blu-ray.
Totally agree.
Well, another thing I'm wondering about before we get out of here is how people can find you, Jamie McGregor.
Well, if they're interested enough to do that, I'm on Twitter at jmac_ref, R-E-F, jmac_ref. So feel free to at me about whatever it is that I've said in this particular episode that has upset and offended you. That's what Twitter's for, isn't it?
I don't see any other reason why we need social media than to offend and be offended about the most trivial of things. But thank you for sharing that with us, Jamie. You can follow this show, as I mentioned earlier, on @WeeklyTrek on Twitter. You can also find the entire feed on the tricordertransmissions.com/weeklytrek. If you go to the Tricorder Transmissions main page, you can actually find us there. You can search for the Tricorder Missions channel on your podcast, wherever you listen. Listen to us, rate us, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. You can also find us on YouTube. Did you know that we have a really cool YouTube channel? So you can check that out as well. But that's all I have for everyone.
And you can usually hear you on Politics, which is an awesome podcast. And you guys very kindly invited me to step in for a STLV Roundup edition, which I had a great time doing. But I just want to say it's a fantastic podcast, and I can't wait for your next few episodes. So if you haven't done it, go out there and listen to Shashank and Barry on Politics. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Not to toot our own horn, but we do appreciate you saying that. Barry and I, Jamie, our latest episode, yes, was an STLV roundup from a Polytrex point of view, on which Jamie joined us, and definitely one of our best episodes. You can find Polytrex on @Polytrex on Twitter. You can find me on @gutter_hero. If you get that reference, you're awesome. But
I do not, and I am not awesome.
No, Jamie, you have other reasons why you're awesome, buddy. Thank you so much. One of those is the fact that you got to join me on this, and I'm really excited to re-listen to this on what I'm sure will be one of many, many, many weekly treks that I hope to get to listen to you and co-host with you on.
Shashank, thank you very much for having me on, and thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you on another episode of WeeklyTrek.
And onward to Starside.